Queen Street United Methodist Church in Kinston, North Carolina. And we welcome you to our Wesley Bible study. Today we're going to be going over the last part of chapter 14, and we're going to go through chapter 15. Hopefully we can get through both of these today. We're going to pick up at verse 25 in chapter 14. And what's going on is there's a negotiation in progress between Moses and God, and Moses is trying to get God to be forgiving of the people when they lost confidence in their ability and God's ability to carry them into the promised land. So what's going on here? Basically, God has made Moses an offer, and the offer is, let me kill all these people, and then I'll make a great nation out of you, because I'm fed up with them. Okay, that's the bottom line. And Moses is saying, hey, wait a minute. You know, you kill all these people, and what kind of propaganda is that going to generate with our adversaries? They're going to think that you're the God who abandoned your people, and you're not faithful to them. So what are we going to do about that? All right, the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, how long shall this wicked congregation complain against me? I've heard the complaints of the Israelites, which they complain against me. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. Your dead bodies, because they said, it would have been better for us to have died in Egypt or in the wilderness. So God's saying, you defined the punishment. Your dead body shall fall in this very wilderness, and of all your number, included in the census from 20 years old and up, who have complained against me, not one of you shall come into the land which I swore to settle you, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. But your little ones, who you said would become plunder, I will bring in, and they shall know the land that you have despised. But as for you, your dead body shall fall in the wilderness, and your children shall be shepherds in the wilderness for 40 years, and shall suffer for your faithfulness until the last of your dead bodies lies in the wilderness. You know, a sweet God here. According to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for every day a year, you shall bear the iniquity 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. I, the Lord, have spoken. Surely I will do thus to all this wicked congregation gathered together against me in the wilderness. They shall come to a full end, and there they shall die. And the men whom Moses sent to spy the land, and who returned and made all the congregation complain against him by bringing a bad report about the land, the men who brought an unfavorable report about the land died by a plague before the Lord. But Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, alone remained alive of those men who went out to spy the land. All right, so the compromise is this, and the compromise indicates a change in the way God has described the way punishments are meted out. It used to be that God, if God punished some person for a sin, that punishment was transmitted also to the second, third generations. Okay? God is limiting this to the generation that sinned. So there's a compromise. Okay? I don't know that this is a permanent change to the ruling that God has given. I think this comes out to me more of an exception to the rule. Okay? And here's the point. If you have a rule and there can be exceptions to it, is it a rule? Especially a divine rule. Okay? Interesting. When Moses told all these words to all the Israelites, the people mourned greatly, rose early in the morning and went up to the heights of the hill country, saying, and this is Philistine country now, here we are, we will go up to the place that the Lord has promised, for we have sinned. But Moses said, why do you continue to transgress the command of the Lord? That will not succeed. Do not go up, for the Lord will not be with you. Is not with you. Do not let yourselves be struck down before your enemies, for the Amalekites and the Canaanites will confront you there, and you shall fall by the sword, because you have turned back from following the Lord. The Lord will not be with you. But they presumed to go up to the heights of the hill country, even though the ark of the covenant of the Lord and Moses had not left the camp. So if you don't have the ark of the covenant with you, you don't have God with you. All right? So this is partly God, and it is partly Moses who decides that the ark is not going to leave the tabernacle. Okay? Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and defeated them, pursuing them as far as Hormah. Okay, so they tried to raid, and it didn't work. And, you can credit that to the fact that God was not with them. You can also credit it to the fact that they probably were not prepared for the war at all. This next generation that's going to go into Canaan, there's every evidence that they got a lot of training before they went into the land. Okay, they armed themselves better, but this incursion was based on the assumption that God would bless what they were doing because they were finally doing what God wanted them to do. And it turns out it was too late. Okay, in this story. Before I go into 15, I want to reiterate something that we talked about last week, and I brought it out again on the makeup video. This one seems to be working okay. Whenever you have a question about why this God seems to be different from our perception of God today, you have to go back to why was the book written and who was it written for. Okay, on the one hand, it was written for the people so that they would regain a sense of culture and identity before they set out from captivity out of the Persian Empire. Okay, the other thing is that this book is being written for the king of Persia, because they've got to convince the king of Persia that they are worthy, that this God is worthy of being worshipped, and that they are worthy as a people to have an identity that is traditional, set, not something invented on the spur of the moment, that they have a long history of interaction with this God, that this God interacts with them, God talks to them, that and is present in different manifestations. They're trying to convince the king of Persia that if you don't let the people come back to their homeland, then you're going to run afoul of a really nasty God. Okay?
So how long have they been in captivity in Persia?
70 years, according to the scripture. But 70 is like, 7 is a fulfillment, perfection. So they were in captivity long enough. That's basically what you get out of 70. Okay, I don't know how long they were in captivity, but they were in captivity long enough.
Was it captivity like when they were in Egypt?
Similar, especially under the Babylonians. While the Egyptians were really indifferent to what religion these people had until the plagues and all of that. The Babylonians were not indifferent to it. The Babylonians seemed very curious about this, and they wanted to know the attributes of the God that they had defeated. Okay, so you have stories about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You have Daniel, where they're brought into the court. These are not people that are generally put out in the slave population, but they are slaves of the court of the king of Babylon. So you have this kind of thing happening in the Babylonian Empire, and then things get very benign when they come into the Persian Empire. The Persians recognize everybody's right to worship whatever god they came from, and so they're very tolerant people. I know that we celebrate the Greek defeat of the Persians, but quite frankly, the Persians were, unlike their descendants today, very tolerant of other people's faiths and beliefs. They treated women much better than the Greeks did. So
Were the
what were,
Persians Muslim back then?
no, Islam didn't happen until like the 12th century AD. So it was an offshoot of Judaism. So Islam is just a new thing. These people, if you want to go back to the earliest kinds of faiths that we see, Zoroastrianism is a very ancient Persian religion, and it still exists today, although they are looked down upon by the Shia. So anyway, just to know that this is a very tolerant regime, and they're considering letting the people come back with all their loot in order to reestablish themselves in their homeland. So that's why God is portrayed the way God is portrayed, because you have to scare the king in order to convince the king that you should come back. Okay? All right, so now a huge shift in gears takes place in chapter 15. Now we're talking about, I don't know, this is supposedly 40 years from when they're coming into the homeland, but God is telling them what they're going to have to do when they come into the homeland. Okay? You would think you would, kind of wait until they're on the border, closer to it. But anyway, way back when, God says, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you come into the land that you are to inhabit, which I am giving you, and you make an offering by fire to the Lord from the herd of the flock, whether a burnt offering or a sacrifice to fulfill a vow, or as a freewill offering, or at your appointed festivals, to make pleasing odor for the Lord. That's an interesting thing. Then whoever presents such an offering shall present also a grain offering, 1/10 of an ephah, which is 3.6 liters. Okay. Of an ephah, or choice flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin. A hin is 22 liters. Okay.
Mine says mixed with 3 pints of oil.
Yeah, there's oil in there too. Or a hin. Oh, that's right. 1/4 of a hin of oil. Moreover, you shall. My thing cut off, my printer, so I'm trying to figure out the word. Okay. Moreover, you shall offer 1/4 of a hin of wine as a drink offering with the burnt offering or the sacrifice for each lamb. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, I'm going to skip the rest of this paragraph because it keeps doing that. Okay, if you're going to bring a meat offering, then you got to bring a grain offering and an oil offering and a wine offering. Okay, why? Because you got to give the priest a balanced diet. That's what this is all about. Okay. Now the idea that this is a fragrant odor to the Lord, it isn't just God loves barbecue. It's you see this early on, after the flood, Noah offers an offering that's a sweet odor to the Lord. Abraham does this, and it's a sweet odor. And what we have is an anthropomorphism of God, that God really likes the smell. And you'll see this also with incense that's been designed for the temple and all of that. Evidently, God has a really keen sense of smell, and has preferences. Okay, just like all of the rest of us. But there's got to be a balanced diet for the priests. That's what they're saying. Okay, thus it shall be done for each ox or ram, for each of the male lambs or the kids, according to the number of the offering, so that you shall do with each and every one. Every native Israelite shall do these things in this way, in presenting an offering by fire, a pleasing odor to the Lord. And then they say, and by the way, resident aliens. These are resident aliens. Okay? So you're not talking about in the wilderness, you're talking about resident aliens that live in your land. If they want to play, they can bring an offering too. And all of your laws that apply to you should apply also to resident aliens. So if you're going to live in a Jewish community, you're going to be doing kosher. You're not going to be raising hogs in the Jewish community. Okay? So that what God is saying, now this is not the same thing as a resident alien becoming a Jew. It's just that if a resident alien acts like a Jew, then God will honor what they're doing and treat them no differently than if they were Jewish. Okay? Let's see. And then in 17, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, after you come into the land which I'm bringing you, whenever you eat of the bread of the land, you shall present a donation to the Lord." I love that. You shall present it just as you present a donation from the threshing floor. Throughout your generations, you shall give to the Lord a donation from the first of your batch of dough. The government's still looking for my dough. All right. This one is interesting. But if you unintentionally fail to observe all these commandments that the Lord has spoken to Moses, everything that the Lord has commanded you by Moses from the day the Lord gave commandment and thereafter through your generations, then if it was done unintentionally, without the knowledge of the congregation, the whole congregation shall offer one young bull for a burnt offering, a pleasing odor to the Lord, together with its grain offering and its drink offering according to the ordinance, and one male goat for a purification offering. The priest shall make atonement for all the congregation of the Israelites. They shall be forgiven. It was unintentional. And they have brought their offering and offering by fire to the Lord, and their purification offering before the Lord for their error. All the congregation of the Israelites shall be forgiven, as well as the aliens residing among you, because the whole people was involved in the error. Okay, what is this? It reminds me of basic training, where one guy screwed up and everybody had to drop for 50.
Oh.
Okay? And the lesson was, if somebody screws up, he can get you all killed. And that's what they're trying to teach us. Okay? So God is saying, somebody screws up, but nobody else knew about it. But then it comes to light that somebody didn't follow the procedure. Everybody is responsible for this person messing up. Okay, the unintentional part of it has more to do with the congregation than it does with the individual who messed up. So you're looking at God's understanding of a sin by one is a sin by all. But if it's unintentional, we can work this out. All right?
But how do you know if it's unintentional?
I thought the priests were the ones that.
Yeah, the priests decide what's unintentional and what ain't. Okay? The same priests that, by the way, get the penalty offering. Okay? Just saying. I read through this thing and this sounds like the IRS. It really does. You got an offering, and then if you don't do it right, then you got a penalty. Then you got to pay interest and penalties on it. More dough, more dough. Nothing's changed. An individual who sins unintentionally, so present a female goat a year old for purification offering. The priest will make atonement before the Lord for the one who commits an error, for when it's unintentional, to make atonement for the person who then shall be forgiven. For both the native among the Israelites and the alien residing among you shall have the same law for everyone who acts in error. But whoever acts high-handedly, whether native-born or alien, affronts the Lord and shall be cut off from among the people because of having despised the word of the Lord and broken his commandment. Such a person shall be utterly cut off and bear the guilt. That means if you did it intentionally. If you did it because you didn't want to be part of the group, okay, you wanted to stand out, you wanted to rebel, or something like that, that's not unintentional, and there's no forgiveness for that. When the people murmured against God, God did not consider that unintentional. God said that wasn't a mistake, and you're going to pay the penalty for it. Okay, there's no coming back, no forgiveness. You're going to die in the wilderness. That's it. All right. Now here's one that has profound implications for our understanding of Christianity and New Testament stuff. When the Israelites were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. Those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses, Aaron, and the whole congregation. They put him in custody because it was not clear what should be done to him. See, it wasn't clear. They knew, this is something we brought up before about the Ten Commandments. You got the Ten Commandments. If somebody breaks them, then what do? Okay, so this is what they do. Then the Lord said to Moses, the man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him outside the camp. The whole congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death, just as the Lord had commanded. Okay, so he broke the Sabbath, and the penalty for breaking the Sabbath is death. Okay, now what's Jesus doing? And you see this happening in the Gospel of Mark that we're going through now. Okay, Jesus breaks the Sabbath. Was the guy doing something evil on the Sabbath? No. Okay, those of us who went to the synagogue a couple of weeks ago, one of the gentleman talking to us talked about his mother, who would on Friday before sundown turn the stove on low flame because you can't start a fire on the Sabbath. So she would just keep the thing on low flame so that all she had to do was up the flame. Okay, she didn't turn on the flame. She didn't start a fire on the Sabbath. Okay, so okay, you can see where Jesus might get frustrated with the Pharisees over this kind of stuff. Okay, so Jesus violated the Sabbath any number of ways. He was always violating the Sabbath, and that's one of the reasons why the Pharisees and the Sadducees wanted to kill him, because he was flaunting the law. Okay?
Have you watched that show, The Chosen?
No, I haven't watched The Chosen yet.
It's very, has anybody in here watched it?
I watched a few of them.
It's very down to earth. It's like it would be in real life.
Right.
Husband and wife arguing, just the everyday task of everyday people. And the first one we had to get through. It wasn't, gee, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
But after I got through the first one, then it got a lot better. And it's what you're talking about now.
Mhm.
Jesus sinning, they brought that out on the Sabbath.
Right. Right, and the thing is, what Jesus was trying to do was to get back to the motivation for the law, the reason for the law. Why do we have the law? What is the purpose? And so the purpose of the Sabbath is to honor God, not just have a day of rest. It's our recognition. Every Sabbath we recognize who our Creator is. Okay, and that's the purpose of the Sabbath. But if you are doing things on the Sabbath that recognize who your Creator is, that look like work, are you violating the Sabbath? And that's that's the point that Jesus was trying to bring out. Okay.
Well, say this guy, if he had a family.
Yeah.
And the fire had gone out.
Right.
And they have no food.
Right.
On the Sabbath.
Tough.
I mean, yeah, poor planning.
Yeah.
But he's providing possibly.
Yeah.
So do you think this really happened?
I do, actually.
You think the loving God?
I don't know if it happened then or when. It may have happened when the Pharisees really started getting into the nitty-gritty and fine print of the law. Okay, I'm not sure that it happened in a wilderness setting, but the principle, this is a priestly narrative, and so this is something that at the very least it's something that they were aware of when they were in captivity.
I was raised as a Baptist, and
Oh, a Baptist, huh? Okay. But did you observe the law as if you were a resident alien? I feel like I'm a resident alien in the South.
My father was a trustee, and he was actually the treasurer of our church.
Uh-huh.
And we were not allowed, he was not allowed, or he wouldn't let anybody work on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Right,
in his family, not just, he didn't just,
yeah,
but like when a hurricane would come, and he'd have to go to, he was a shipbuilder, a boat builder. He'd
Uh-huh.
have to go down to the ship,
right. Try and salvage something.
so, well, to see what was going on.
Right,
And he said that was okay to do that. So,
it's the ox in the ditch thing. Okay, that's,
what?
it's the ox in the ditch, you know, that we studied a little bit, when, in Exodus, when the laws were being, formulated and everything. On the Sabbath, if the ox is in the ditch, you can pull the ox out. You know, that kind of thing. So I think this is an ox in the ditch situation, you know, your fire's gone out, you gotta feed the family and, you know, but then you're gonna have to light a fire and, you know, it's just, anyway, they killed him, okay?
Jay
And-
gets back to,
Mhm.
like we are today, a lot of times, the punishment does not fit the crime.
True,
And even in the Bible, there's crimes done that you fit death.
yes,
And they don't kill him, they forget it.
yeah,
And then this guy's picking up sticks.
yeah.
I mean, it just makes totally no sense to me. I just can't figure it out.
I'm glad it doesn't make any sense to you, okay? It shows that, you and Christ probably have some similar attitudes towards the law.
I'd like to think I'm similar to Christ in
There
some
you go.
ways.
Well, something rubbed off, Van.
What, does this mean that God has changed a little bit over the centuries, that it's like for us,
I think our perception of God has changed over the centuries.
we've changed it ourselves?
Yes, in many respects, but at the same time, I think God's intervention, God's redeeming intervention through Christ is a completely, totally different paradigm shift.
You said there's 613 laws or something?
Something like that.
Okay. Now, does God expect everybody to adhere to those?
But they're not all God's laws. Google it sometime.
Yes.
I Googled it and got the whole 613 laws.
You want God's
A
laws?
lot of them
Go,
are man-made. They're not all from God.
if you want God's laws, go to the basic 10.
Very good.
Go to what?
Go to the 10, because those are the ones he wrote.
Ten Commandments.
Yeah,
Ten Commandments. Oh, well, that
yeah.
cuts it down a little bit. doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And we might be critical of that, but God knows
Pretty much
that our
knows
country has a lot
everything.
more than 610 laws. So,
And God
Okay.
also knows all those were man-made.
all of those were man-made, yes, and flawed. All right, let's move to the next thing. I think it's kind of interesting. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them to make fringes on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and put a blue cord at the fringe at each corner. You have the fringes so that you, when you see it, you will remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and not follow the lust of your own hearts and your own eyes." So this is supposed to keep you pure. You know, it's like your wedding ring. It's a reminder not to go messing around. "So you shall remember and do all my commandments, and you shall be holy to your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God." Yes, okay.
I'm 77 years old, and
How are you?
be quiet.
Don't get specific, Frank.
And I have been in church my whole life.
Yeah,
I've been in Sunday school my whole life. And I have never heard of that tassel until it was in The Chosen.
yep.
They talked about it in The Chosen, and Frank and I were sitting there looking at each other like, we've never heard of that.
There's a lot of things you haven't heard about that
And then
garment.
it came up again here. We've never studied it.
Well, here it
I mean,
is.
I've never heard of it.
Okay, this does not have a blue cord in the tassels. But this is a prayer shawl. Okay, and when they talk about the garment, this is the garment they're talking about. Okay? the tassels are on the corners. Okay, and like I say, these do not have the blue cord on them,
A
but,
lot longer.
yeah, but they are longer, and the knotting on them is very specific. Okay, when they talk about the Apostle Paul was a tent maker, he was a rabbi who knew how to make these. This is a tent. This is the tabernacle. Okay, so the prayer shawl is the tabernacle. And when people go into the tabernacle to pray, okay, sometimes they close the door of the tabernacle. Okay, when the woman came to Jesus to be healed, and she got through the crowd and grabbed the corner of his garment, she grabbed the tassel on the prayer shawl. Okay, now Jesus' prayer shawl was one probably of a workman, at least the one that's described at the crucifixion, where it's more like a poncho and it's worn under your regular garments.
So you wore those every day?
Yes, wore those every day. And Jesus said, when you pray, don't go making faces of agony and stuff like you're being sincere. When you pray, close the door of your tent so that nobody sees, and what you do in private, God rewards openly. Okay, so that's what the prayer shawl is all about. But these tassels are representative of things like tribe, the fact that you are one of God's people. It's the corners are these are the most sacred part of prayer shawl.
What does it say?
I have no idea. It's probably the Shema. It's probably Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one.
So where did you get that?
Online, Amazon sells prayer shawls. They're probably made in China.
Made in China. Of course it's made in China.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Just saying, like everything else.
I wonder if they sell dispositions.
Sell what? Dispositions? Well, I don't know. I've talked to a number of Chinese over my life, so they have different dispositions. But no, I wanted to share that with you. Get a sense of context of what it's talking about. But when Jesus talks about going to your tent, that's what he's talking about. When we talk about Paul was a tent maker, it took a rabbi to understand the design of those tents. So he was going to the Jewish communities and designing prayer shawls for them, because you can imagine in Turkey how hard it was to get a prayer shawl. So that's a sense of context of where we're going to. Okay, so anyway, I think we've run out of time. But thanks for being with us today. So glad to have you. And if you have any questions or comments or snide remarks, just revlev@ncc at UMC, revlev@nccumc.org. And I hope to hear from you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was a very